Hello, and welcome to ScoringNote.com's extensive review of Dorico 3. This is a part of an ongoing series in which every aspect of Dorico 3 will be looked at in detail. My name is Doug Gibson, and I'm going to be looking at the guitar features found in Dorico 3. We'll have an in-depth look at both the guitar tablature and the new fingering notation features. Readers of ScoringNotes.com are on the most advanced blog I know of for music notation. Therefore, this review is going to be specifically geared towards high-end professional users who make their living from music and have very strong opinions about music notation and the demands of their music notation software. It is my belief that you cannot separate good music notation from broader musical understanding. Therefore, I'm going to also be including quite a bit of subjective opinions based on my own experiences as both a guitarist and a professional orchestrator and composer. Dorico is built as the next generation scoring application and the music notation software for the 21st century. Now, the team has both the experience and the vision to create a superior program. The question, though, is does it innovate enough now? I hear the same question all the time regarding Dorico. Is it ready yet? And therein lies the central question. Do I buy in now or do I wait it out? At the end of this video, I will give my opinion on this very question. Right now, Dorico has several exclusive features that offer clear advantages. However, there are also a number of features that Dorico does not have that are contained in other notation programs. I would say Dorico has a very moderate to light learning curve. You do need to read the manual, of course. Let's take a look at our first example. Okay, this was done in about 5 minutes, and with the out-of-the-box default settings. There have been zero movement from my hand to the placement of the text to the note head. I'd say that is pretty impressive. What I really like about it is it just works. Yes, I have a lot of keyboard shortcuts in Sibelius that I use to get a very similar result very quickly, but I have to say again, I'm very impressed that right out of the box, very little adjustment on my part has been done. And again, this example was done in about 5 minutes, and the very first 5 minutes of my using of Dorico. I would like to now take a look at what I consider the most impressive feature, hands down, in Dorico 3 with guitar, and that is the guitar fingering. Of course, it is my duty as a reviewer to read through all the materials of the version history to get the understanding of the program. And it's fairly common to flip from one page to another and just see one term after another term. Of course, that is what an instruction manual is for. So, highlighter in hand and moving at a slow pace, it's not often I read something as bold as the second sentence in the guitar fingering description. As I continue to read, it begins to sound like there may be a new sheriff in town. Bold. I like you, Dorico. It's not bragging if you can back it up, right? All right, well, let's see what you have. I'll set out to recreate the example provided by the Dorico team in the version history. Enter text. Dorico has created a finger popover. Fingering is added using the Shift and F shortcut or via the symbol on the lower right-hand part of the screen. L or R indicate that you are inputting either a left or right-hand fingering. Below, circled, is the alternative entry to Shift and F. The blue L box shows this is a left-hand text box. As always, memorizing the keyboard shortcuts will really increase your speed. Let's see how this works in real time. I can simply select a note, press Shift and F, and voila, the fingerings appear. The other cool thing is I can actually select multiple notes within a chord. Now you can only do this for one rhythmic value, but I can now add on the multiple fingerings that I want to add on to the chord. And Dorico correctly aligns the numbers with the notes. This is a fantastic advantage. For the sake of comparison, let's look at how Sibelius handles text fingering. I go up into the menu, I select fingering, and it's pretty fast. I can simply add in the finger I want, and by pressing spacebar, I move pretty quickly to each note, adding in the fingering. Now, if you notice though, the placement's a bit funny. There's one above the note, there's one to the right of the note, there's some to the left of the note, another one to the right of the note, and this means that oftentimes I find myself having to go back and manually adjust the fingering placements. Where Dorico has a distinct advantage, in my opinion, is the handling of text for chords. Sibelius, I can add in multiple fingerings on one chord. However, notice where the placement is, and that's not where I want it. So again, I have to manually adjust the placement of the text fingerings. So within an hour of using Dorico, I'm already feeling very comfortable. And I have to say, the results out of the box are fantastic and the best I've ever seen. Here you can see I'm now adding the text fingering to a very well-known classical guitar piece. And it's pretty straightforward and a breeze. I can add in slurs, no problem. And we'll get to harmonic notation in a second, but that was no problem either. The great thing is, there's very little adjusting I have to do. And again, this is all the default settings in Dorico. Guitar string indicators. Dorico offers the users a variety of ways of entering text. One of the fantastic design features of Dorico is economic use of space. Here I can simply select the chord and click Show for string indicators. And most impressive is it has the correct strings, which was not easy to do. If I want to move to the left or to the right, I simply click a button. There's no clicking or dragging needed. Sibelius, on the other hand, has a very cumbersome way of handling string indicators. I have to go into the Symbols menu and scroll down almost an endless list of symbols to find what I'm looking for. Once I find the correct symbol that I'm looking for, I often have to click and drag the symbol into place. Dorico offers a clear advantage. As I alluded to earlier, Dorico offers the user a variety of ways of entering text. I can simply click on a note, press Shift and P, and then enter the string that I wish to indicate. It was surprising for me though to see that the symbol was much larger via this method. There is a third method that you can use, which is over in the menu. You can go into the Techniques menu, scroll down to Guitar, and again enter the string. Both will have a larger size symbol. Now, these can be adjusted. I want to emphasize that they can be adjusted, but for the purposes of our review, I'm just showing the default settings. Right-hand fingering text can be entered exactly the same way as left-hand fingering text. Shift plus F, and you can alternate by pressing the up or down arrows. For the sake of variety, I'm showing how they can also be entered in the menu below. If you notice, the E is in a different voice, so the stem is facing down. So when I enter the right-hand fingering text, accordingly, it's going to go below the stem. Now, even though A is actually would make sense to be above M, this is not a deficiency of the software. It's about understanding the musical context, and the software is behaving very logically here. Turning a note head into a harmonic indication is also very simple and easy. I simply go to the menu, click on harmonic, and I can choose between artificial or natural. There's a variety of other options available. One minor gripe I had, however, with the menu windows is having to scroll from left to right each time. I would prefer it if it would just leave it where it was. Barre chords is an essential part of guitar playing. One curious decision is the handling of barre chords in Dorico. The team decided to use this as a technique rather than a fingering. As you can see, it does it very well. I can just simply highlight the passage that I wish to add the bar to, and I get this really nice looking indicator. I can add in the fingering very easy. However, I cannot add in the fret number that the bar needs to be at. Now, I am told that the team promises to update this in the future, so I'm going to give them a pass on this. However, I do think this is going to be something that will be a source of frustration for some users. My overall review for the guitar fingering and string indicators, the results are fantastic. Believe the hype. It offers a clear advantage over my current notation program, which is Sibelius, and produces the best out-of-the-box results that I've ever seen. I have total confidence in the Dorico team that they will iron out any kinks with the barre chords, and that these features do indeed represent an innovation worthy of being called the next generation of music notation. I would like to talk about the two examples of guitar notation found within the Dorico version history. I wrestled with whether the inclusion of this in my review was fair or not. In the end, I've obviously decided that it indeed must be brought up.
Perhaps the two examples are not meant to be real examples of music notation. Rather, they are simply visual, graphic art designed to showcase the features of Dorico. They are more like Andy Warhol than, say, Beethoven. If that is the case, it makes a very poor first impression. I found myself immediately reacting with oh, I would not want my scores to look like that. More importantly, I found the errors often revealed what I felt are fundamental weaknesses of Dorico's current approach to guitar notation. Understanding guitar instrumentation and your musical intent is an essential and integral aspect of notation. Let's briefly look at some of the major errors. Number 1, no text indication of bar chords and finger positions. Look closely at each measure. What is the harmony on the downbeat of each measure? It's the same chord throughout, right? Even though all are D major sonorities, and in fact the same A for the upper pitch, the voicing at the 2/4 measure forces the hand up 5 measures and would have to be played at the 10th fret. The hand position shift actually begins on the second beat of measure 34, but there's no indication of that contained. 1A. Harmonic notation is vague without the Roman numeral indicator. The guitar world has different schools of notation for harmonics. Those who are interested in the subject, Douglas Neat has produced a 28-page PDF document of the various styles. However, you will not find within that what is included here. See, there's no way to actually play this harmonic as indicated. What needs to be included is some kind of Roman numeral fret marker indication to indicate where the harmonic should be played. This is a type of method that is found in the music of Agustin Barrios Memoir, and this is the Richard Stover version, which is pretty much probably the most popular or standard version of Barrios's music. Number 2, the right hand fingering. The default hand position for a guitar player is to have IMA cover the 3 nylon or treble strings, and for the thumb to play the 3 bass strings. A minor quip is that the very first indication is redundant. This is exactly what anyone would do. A far greater concern is this example. If this right hand fingering was correct, how would the low open string be plucked? Number 3, dynamics. Guitars would only ever be able to decrease in sound after being plucked. Again, we have a redundant notation. I don't believe I've ever seen a dynamic indication above the stave. A far better solution would be simply adding in an accent mark. Chord diagrams. With version 3, we find 2 main features introduced. Dorico takes the novel approach of defining chords not in terms of matching specific combinations of fingered frets at a particular position on the neck, but rather in terms of a shape that is playable by the human hand. The second feature that is claimed is that the guitar tablature and notation are linked, and that this is an advantage over other notation software. So the idea being that if you made an edit on one of the staves, it would be reflected in the other. However, this review does not support the claims. Being a longtime user of the notation program Sibelius, the very first thing that struck me was how similar in both the design and function the chord diagrams are with Sibelius. One key point of difference, however, is that within Dorico, the diagram feature must first be assigned within the setup mode. I found it curious, however, that standard guitar tuning would need to be enabled. I understand for the other tunings, but it is called standard tuning for a reason. As soon as we complete that step, notating my very first chord diagram was very simple. This again is one of the fantastic features of Dorico, that literally within minutes, you can produce something that looks very professional. Taking this one step further, I then proceeded to add tablature to some chords. The notation looks good, the diagrams look pretty good, and the tablature looks very good. This again took me maybe about 5 minutes to do. Adding chord symbols is pretty straightforward within Dorico. You simply press Shift and Q to get the chord popover window. Alternatively, there is a button down here at the bottom right hand of the corner which you can press, which will also give you the same popover window. Let's take a look at how the conform to hand function works within Dorico. I'm simply going to select one note of this chord, and I'm going to press the letter N to move up a tab string. As you can see, Dorico has automatically adjusted the note from the 6th string up to the 5th string because it would be physically impossible to play otherwise. It has done a nice job. Even if it seems overly repetitive, I would like to again emphasize with how impressed I am with the results you can get very quickly with Dorico. While all the details are outside of the scope of this review, Dorico is a very deep program that lets you customize the most minute aspects of music notation. In an effort to try and be fair, I want to emphasize that the things that Dorico excels at, it excels better than any program I've ever seen. From this point on in the review, my opinion of Dorico's guitar functions go quickly downhill, encountered head scratching and utter disappointment. Let's return to the chord diagrams. I searched high and low, but I could find no way that I could directly add fingering text to the chord diagrams. This to me seems like a very basic function of chord diagrams. In Sibelius, it is quite easy to do this. I can simply select the chord diagram, go to Edit Chord Diagram, and just simply click on the dots and add in the fingering text. Alternatively, I can also add in fingering text below, and we get a result that looks like the example you're now seeing. Quite stunned and baffled why this was not included. Overall, I found the chord diagram functions to be quite buggy or fidgety. As you can see in this example, I've entered in the text, but I've misspelled the chord. I actually wanted it to be a B minor add 9 chord. So I go back into the popover window and add the adjustment. Now, as you see, all the dots on the chord diagram have mysteriously disappeared. Okay, so I can now go into the engrave mode and create the chord diagram. This is pretty straightforward and no problem at all to do. As you can see, I've entered in the chord as I've wanted it. I've named it the chord that I want, and I can save it. And also clicking on the chord can be moved up and down along the neck. Okay, to test this further, I'll highlight the chord and I'll go to transpose the chord. Now, here within the transpose window, I will select it to move up a fourth to make it an E minor add 9. Once I select OK, so you notice that the chord diagram has not added in the fret marker. It has left the chord diagram down at the 2nd fret. Another curiosity is with the chord diagram library. As you can see, I select D minor 11, there's a whole bunch of chords. I can do the same with the 2nd chord. Now for the E minor, there's nothing, and there is no chord within the chord library. So again, I have to go into the engrave mode and create the chord again from scratch. This takes up time. Okay, now completing the chord, I've again titled it and selected move along the neck. Okay, and now what I like to do is reverse engineer this example and see if I can get it to behave going back to B minor 9. I'll again go back to the transpose and select that I want it to move down a perfect fourth. Click OK. And the tablature in the notation is correct, but again, the chord diagram has not moved either in the diagram, and this time also the chord spelling in the text has not changed a bit. Now, this might be a user error on my part that I don't understand the way Dorico is laid out, but either way, it is very counterintuitive, and I found it very frustrating. One of my least favorite aspects of Dorico is how the chord diagrams try and guess what the author is inputting and actually set up boundaries and barriers to getting the results that I wanted. So as you can see, I've started a new score and I'm going to select standard guitar tuning from the chord diagrams. I'm now going to go into write mode and enter in the chord exactly as I want it. Now, I do play guitar, so I know exactly what's going to conform to the hand and get the exact voicing that I want. I'm going to spell out a D9 chord. I'm going to add on a sharp, and now that is exactly the chord how I want it and how I want it voiced. So I go in to the popover window, and I'm going to add in the chord text, D9. And what we get is a very strange looking chord diagram. This is a very peculiar voicing for D9 chord. Now, why could that be? How it handles higher alterations. The allow omission of fifth is by default selected. So now this means there's a whole extra step that I have to go through in order to get the chord that I want. I can, of course, go back into Dorico and go into the chord diagram library and choose from it there. However, again, this seems to go against the core philosophy of Dorico, which is making notation easier. It has actually made things more difficult and added a redundant extra step for me. Adding tablature to the chord made no difference whatsoever. So this raises questions about the original claim found in the version history that the staves are linked together and that this was an advantage over other notation programs. Additionally, chord diagrams that are saved can only be saved within the one file. They will not go across files, so you can't just save a chord diagram and have it every time you open up a new score. You have to create a template that you work from. The more extensions added onto a chord, the more frustrating I found Dorico to work with. In this example, you'll see I'm trying to notate a D11. Now, if you look closely, you'll notice that both the 5th and the 9th have been omitted, and instead I get an extra root note that I did not want. So what I have to do is, again, go into the note input options, and under this menu is where we'll find selected is include root and chord. So now I'm going to change that to omit from the chord. And further on down, this is where you can see the alterations. And so this example shows that the 5th should be omitted. So I go and I'll try again. And this time, strangely, even though I have the 5th omitted selected, there it is in the chord symbol. Okay, so go back. Let's try again. So you can see, there it was. I have both the omission of 5th and the 9th. Okay, so let's just conform to what Dorico wanted. I'm going to add in the voicing exactly in the notation now to reflect the chord diagram. So what you see here now is exactly what the chord diagram is, but in music notation. There are two things that I really do not like with the results that I'm getting here. First is the actual voicing of the chord itself that's included in the diagram. There's this minor ninth from the F sharp to the G, which is a really harsh kind of sound. So that I did not want. The second thing is chord spelling theory completely loses its meaning. A D11, by definition, requires a ninth to be included. To test this, let's add in the chord spelling of D7 add 4. As you can see, I actually get the exact same chord symbol. What I would really like is simply to have an option where Dorico would make a chord diagram of whatever I decide to notate or how to voice a chord. The whole philosophy of trying to find chord diagrams with open strings, I think, is very misguided. The most successful and thorough method that many guitar players know is what is called the caged method, which stands for the C, A, G, E, and D. These are the 5 main type of chord shapes found on the guitar, and if it works from that, including alterations based off of those 5 shapes, I think you would get a much better result. But again, what I would really like to do is to just simply have the chord diagrams reflect what I have actually written into the music. Another peculiarity I found was how Dorico handled the notation of guitars in alternate tunings. The more elaborate an altered tuning becomes, the more there is a need to show performers where to put the fingers in addition to the sounding pitches. The term for this is Chordatura. So in this example, we can see I have two guitars set up. The first guitar is there to show the pitches as a sound, i.e. concert pitch. Guitar 2 would be the Chordatura stave. What is curious is that the tablature actually does indeed transpose the pitch correctly. That is exactly what I wanted. However, the notation on the same stave does not. Kind of confused as to why this is. They are exactly the same player. Now, I did receive confirmation that the feature of Chordatura is not currently available in this version of Dorico, but it is right there for the tablature. And I don't know why it works on one stave of this second player, but not the other one. Which goes back to the claim within the version history that making an edit in one stave would automatically be reflected in the other. Guitar bends and its accompanying techniques of holds and releases and pre-bends are now included within Dorico. As I mentioned at the outset, this is got to be a Herculean task to code guitar notation. There are already a few different types of schools and styles of guitar notation, and when you consider all the ways players like Jimi Hendrix or Eddie Van Halen mangle the strings, it's gotta be the most difficult aspect to notate. Thus, it's probably not a surprise and should have empathy that this feature was by far the most disappointing feature I encountered within Dorico. And I have to say, it simply does not seem like it was ready to be released to be considered a full-fledged professional program. I was quite shocked to read that there is no playback of bends, releases, or pre-bends in this release of Dorico. When you consider many classic guitar solos, sometimes upwards of 50% or even more of the notes being played are going to have some type of inflection of the string being bent. The final sentence says that this is under consideration for future versions of the software. Personally, I find that to be the wrong tone to take. This is an essential and basic feature that needs to be included. The way it is now, I simply could not use Dorico for any type of guitar transcription that requires bends. Part of my workflow with my clients is sending them demos so they can check the accuracy of my transcriptions. For example, this solo guitar performance by Australian guitarist Tommy Emmanuel. What I often do is have the original MP3 played back on the left channel in my sequencer, and then the notation program playing back the transcription. So that way my clients can hear the notation and we can adjust according to their needs. I am disappointed to say that I just fundamentally do not like the results that Dorico produces with regards to bends and tablature. Let's look at the example found in the version history. When reading the notation, it becomes incredibly difficult to discern where exactly the downbeats are. Rhythmically, this example is actually very simple, but it becomes quite a complex task to discern that the G sharp is actually occurring on beat 3. As I mentioned in the guitar fingering example, Dorico really would be well advised to stop making such basic and fundamental errors in its music examples. There is no way that you can bend an open string. It technically is somewhat plausible on some guitars to reach over and depress the string behind the nut to produce an increase in pitch, but that's very unreliable and you certainly will not get like a full bend or a step and a half from your bends. And again, this would be a very rare and extreme example. The rest of the musical example is equally bizarre. For some reason, we have some pitches within the tablature in which the notes are about half the size of the other note. Interestingly, does not correspond with the notes that are smaller up on the notation. In fact, it looks like almost two completely different musical examples. If you look at the beginning of beat 2, and again, it's quite hard to find, it looks like it's actually implied to be a hold and then what they call a pre-bend and release happening. Now, there is no reason I can think of why you would need to include this A before the B. Additionally, we have another type of bend. It looks like another type of bend is happening, but that's not what's happening at all. I've never been a fan of these type of triangles either. Tablature is a divisive issue within the guitar community. Many professionals actually refuse to read it. Sadly, Dorico does not seem capable of providing the type of notation that I actually prefer. What I prefer is to use the method very similar to the one found in the Guns N' Roses guitar tablature book for Appetite for Destruction. What I like about it is both the notation and the tablature are very clear. And if I need to go into a studio with a session guitar player who does not want to read tablature, it is very clear to see what is actually happening. There is no real reason you cannot have the same graphic functionality of tablature with music notation. It simply seems to be an issue of computer coding. While I'm sympathetic to the difficulty, it is not something that I could allow my scores to use. The nuts and bolts of how to create a bend within Dorico is actually pretty straightforward. You simply select two adjacent notes within the same voice, and Dorico will automatically notate both the bend and the interval of the bend. In the engrave mode of Dorico, under the engraving options, you can find pretty much every parameter is customizable for the appearance of your bends. The Dorico team does deserve credit for allowing such deep and easy to use customization features. This is one of the most perplexing findings I had. There are a number of things that seem deeply thought out and well designed. On the other hand, there are many things I found that are organized in a very confusing fashion, and I find it hard to rationalize the omission of a number of fundamental guitar techniques. It is very common to find guitar notation that uses a quarter step bend. This is just like a small inflection that guitar players will often give to a pitch. Strangely, that is not possible within Dorico right now. The only way you could possibly do that, and remember, there is no playback anyways, would be to go into some kind of microtonal temperament tuning. Why? Why is that so hard? The bends are actually not found within the guitar technique section. Again, I find that rather confusing. Instead, they're in the ornament section next to glissandi. Personally, I think this is a very illogical place to include the bends. Dorico does not seem to be able to handle double or triple bends very well. Because of amplification, guitar players can often let their notes sustain and ring out without having to repluck the string. This is, again, a fairly common technique you find within tablature, where you have to notate a bend going from one interval to another without showing a re-attack of the string. As you can see from this example, it's already cartoon-like enough. Imagine now having all those grace notes and little triangles on top of this. It would be completely impossible to read. While Dorico may have succeeded in improving the ease of input of bend notation over Sibelius, it all still feels rather difficult and too hard for what we're actually trying to do. We are simply looking to create arrows and lines. For a music notation program that is promoting itself as the music notation of the future, I think they've missed what could have been a game changer. I think the Dorico team had a stroke of brilliance by creating different modes for your workflow. The ability to go from the write mode and into the grave mode, where all the pitches are locked down, to create a fun and exciting new way to enter in pitch bend notation. How much more fun would it be to use a stylus, a trackpad, or an iPad than to laboriously press down a button? All this feels quite 20th century to me, and it feels very desktop oriented, and I think that's a mistake. I can't help but daydream about the idea of being able to enter in all the pitches in my transcription or score at the desktop, then going on the subway and being able to add in all the articulations on the go. It would have been the perfect compensation for the fact that bend notation does not currently play back. It is simply more intuitive and more fun to enter in notation this way. And the technology is pretty much already there with almost any basic word processing program. One final and lighthearted example of how I found the organization confusing within Dorico is looking at the instrument list. If you notice, we are now in the fretted instrument section. And of course, you would want to go into the fretted instrument section if you wanted to find fretless instruments. Someone's not listening to somebody here. It's beyond me why I would find fretless instruments in the fretted instrument column. And there is a more serious point to be made. All of this becomes too broad to retain any kind of meaning. There are literally dozens and dozens of fretted instruments. The truth of the matter, in my opinion, is what separates guitar from a lot of these other instruments is not that they share frets, but the electricity and the amplification. A number of these techniques are simply not audible without lots of voltage being run through high-powered amplifiers. Therefore, I think electric guitars and electric basses really need their own separate column. This is far too cluttered and time-consuming. Additionally, I think it would make wise business sense. So to conclude my review on the guitar features in Dorico, if you are a classical guitarist in particular, or perhaps a fingerstyle guitarist or jazz guitar player who doesn't require a lot of inflections such as bends and holds and releases in your music notation, then I think Dorico could be a wonderful solution for you. The fingering text and the string indicators are fantastic both in appearance and usability. Again, the overall design and aesthetic of Dorico, I think, is superb. It really excels at producing elite results with minimal effort, as long as you are not hindered by a number of the missing features. If your primary goal is to create very detailed and intricate tablature notation, then my honest professional advice is to hold off until Dorico is further developed within this area.